This video is a response to Carl Benjamin's video on the Lotus Eaters titled Proposed Roads to Trumpton, in which he is responding to Academic Agent's video on a positive vision for the right, in which Academic Agent essentially proposes a socialist right-wing utopia, which Carl then continues to say, there's no way we can have this nonsense. However, the ethos and the feeling of Trumpton is appealing. We cannot get there by a constructed means. It has to come from within the individual efforts of members of that community. And he is absolutely correct. Now, for those of you who have been part of this channel for a while, I have my own growing and sprouting, I can't even claim that it's blossomed yet, theories and formula for conservatism and conservative societies, conservative individuals, and how they think and how they approach life and its various problems. And Carl brings up a few dynamic aspects to Trumpton, to the idea of a small town where everyone has a place, everyone belongs, and how this comes into being, how it comes to life. And what I would like to do is kind of take some of the ideas that he shared and further distill them, because I don't know if he made this clear enough, but one of the definitions that he gives is the definition of a myth, which is not necessarily a falsehood or a tall tale. It's more of a parable, and he is, of course, correct, and a parable of how the world plays out and how a society chooses to interact within itself and, of course, with the outside world. And then he ties this to traditions, which he accurately describes as something that is, how do you say, tradition has a very muddied time of theorizing itself, because tradition is not something that you think about. It's not something that you theorize. It is, as he correctly identifies, a series of actions, practices that becomes the individual, or that forms the individual. And again, here he is correct. Now, for those of you who have listened to my formula for true conservatism, you know that conservatism is not entirely reliant on tradition itself. And this is where I found a need to not only justify, but discern between the myth and the tradition. As Carl also says correctly, is that change is a constant, and that we must account for change as a constant in our communities, insofar as it doesn't violate the principles of that community. Now, I would alter that. The principles of the communities are born out of the myths that they embody. Now, and that's an important distinction, and it is important that we take this message and remember the important distinctions between myths and traditions, and how change affects tradition to the point that tradition becomes, over time, malleable. Tradition itself warps over time to accommodate the needs of those living in their community and still maintain that sense of wholesome belonging and cohesion of a community that we as humans enjoy, that we seek for, that we yearn for. We want to be a part of something in which we are reliant and can be relied upon therein. We want to have status in our communities. We want to have a form of recognition and a form of security in our communities. And this form of security, of course, cannot be artificially maintained. And so we need to really grapple and understand, and that is why when I formulated True Conservatism, I made it a point to explicitly state that tradition itself, any set of traditions itself, is not necessarily in their isolated form and at any point of time or history or cultural norm is a necessary component for conservatism. It is not. But what is important, what does need to be maintained, what we do need to be vigilant about, are the myths that we make and revere as a community and culture, whatever that culture happens to be. And as I explain in my own True Conservatism formula, that is going to vary depending on the development of any community and its inherent drives on the forces that created it. It's where they get their food, how they are forced to interact one with another in terms of economic commerce, how the social norms in regards to building and maintaining families. All of these things are going to be forces that are enacted upon the community that form the myths that they will cling to and hold to. And these forces that will, for better or for worse, create the myths that uphold this society and inform them of their ethos is what will ultimately save and preserve this community throughout time. What we need to come to grips with is that with the advent of technology and with the ever-growing conveniences and pleasures and developments that we as humans do or accept and implement into our daily lives, some traditions are going to fall by the wayside. We no longer use Easter or Halloween to mark, for example, the turnings of the seasons, by and large, in developed nations, because we have no need to mark the agricultural paradigms of our world anymore. We leave that to the minority of farmers who are producing the majority of our food. However, we have other paradigms we use to maintain social and economic cohesion. Therefore, the traditions around them are going to alter. And they're going to alter either for our good or, we shouldn't accept any changes that don't alter for our good. Let me just put it that way. And there are, of course, those proposing changes that are going to be detrimental. Now, I was very impressed by the way in which this response to academic agents' formulation for a positive vision for the right was approached. And my only goal with this video is to further distinguish and acknowledge the need to discern between myths and traditions. Because what I am noticing on the right is an intellectual stubbornness to cling to tradition blindly. And while that comes from a healthy place, it does disregard the essence of conservatism. Conservatism, from my view and from my formulation, it is not just the oldest, it is the far superior way in which humans have survived and adapted since literally the beginning of human history. Conservatives have adapted and overcome and preserved society and human civilization since civilization's begun. And we have a lot to be proud of. And in terms of proposing a road to Trumpton, all I would simply suggest is that, like Carl suggests, to remember those myths and to be able to say, these myths allow us to advance, or in my own formulation, optimize in X direction. This is a good direction. It preserves family. It optimizes economic growth, and we will be prosperous and happy for it. And we won't cause undue collateral damage as we implement these changes, as we optimize our societies. And that is something that I wanted to grapple with, talk through, and leave for you to consider. Secondly, there is another aspect that he introduced that I was very intrigued by. And it is something that I myself have failed to take into account. He said to the effect that no war is won unless you've defeated the enemy on their home turf. And he's correct. And his analogy for that was in the sense that we needed to formulate an ideology, a language, and a tool set that defeated the left using their own ideology while preserving the conservative ethos. And that is something that I need to take more seriously, because, to be quite honest, I have no idea where the hell to begin. But it is something that he correctly identifies that needs to be done. And so hopefully we'll have a discussion on this on Friday. This is what I'd like to talk about, because it's going to be a very, let's just say we won't solve it overnight, and I'm sure that on this journey I will get many, 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 many things wrong, because that's how this process works. You don't get anything right until there's debate, until you're proven wrong. You find your weaknesses and then you adjust accordingly. And this is going to be the hard part of this project. Identifying conservatism for what it actually is for me is not that difficult. Looking at conservatism through a clear lens to who and what we are, for me, is not difficult in any way, shape, or form. However, taking that reality and formulating a dialect and a theology that moves through a leftist socialist paradigm and comes out victorious is going to be, well, it's going to be hellish. And that's part of the journey we are all going to have to go through. So, just wanted to leave you my thoughts on that. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a, shall we say, a recommendation for the video. But I do hope that I did provide some extra perspective on this, because in order for us to form that dialect, we have to understand that we can take the myths while leaving and adapting the traditions in ways the left doesn't expect. And that is going to be a dangerous and exhilarating road. And I hope to see you all there on Friday. That's it for now, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.